The agenda this week: tour the world ahead in 2017 with foreign correspondent Matthew Fisher. We checked out the cost of disposable style, debated new campaign finance rules, and searched for a route to better transit. The agenda's week in review begins with a look at making Canadian healthcare better now. I want to take you back now many decades, and I want you to tell us about your Egyptian-born grandfather and why his story kind of, I think alerted a passion inside you that led to maybe where you are today.
Sure, and it's a story that actually predates my birth. So my grandparents came to Canada in the early 50s from Cairo in a bit of a rush. They had 3 generations on a ship to Pier 21 in Halifax. My mom still remembers that journey. She was a little girl at the time. And within 18 months of arriving in Montreal, my healthy, strapping, 40-something grandfather had a totally unexpected heart attack. And my family was plunged into essentially a decade of horrible medical experiences in the days of Canadian medicine before Medicare. And by the time my grandfather died in his early 50s, they were not just sort of destroyed from a health perspective, but financially completely destroyed. And my mom still talks about that experience in that it's her belief that the financial devastation and the way that they had to borrow money from family members and friends and the marks that left on those relationships that never really healed, that it was that actually, in her view, ruined their family. So I grew up with that story. It's not the sum total of who I am or why I believe everything I believe, but it certainly had an influence on me. And it certainly led to my belief that, and I think this is a belief shared by most Canadians, that access to healthcare is something that should be based on need, not ability to pay. And that is has been a driving force in my career, for sure.
And yet here we are now with 6 big ideas that you think we need to look at to improve healthcare in Canada. So let's get into them. The first you say, and this sounds like nothing to do with healthcare at all, relationships.
Right.
How is improving relationships within healthcare going to improve healthcare?
So I'm talking about 2 very specific relationships. The first is the relationship between every Canadian and their primary healthcare provider, usually their family doctor. And I talk a lot in the book about how that relationship can benefit people's health, that relationship over time between you and someone who comes to know you, who understands your ups and downs, your broader life, not just one part of your body or another part of your body, but the whole of you, how that can contribute to improvement in health over time, and how it can also make the healthcare system sustainable. But secondly is the relationship between that person's primary care office and the rest of the healthcare system. So as a family doctor myself, when I see patients who need specialty care or who have been going in and out of the hospital or who need care in the community or at home, it's my job to sort of be the quarterback for the whole of that person's journey through the healthcare system. And when those relationships are functioning well, the relationship between the patient and their provider and the relationship between the provider and the rest of the system, everything else works. And all high-performing healthcare systems are built around that core of high-functioning primary care.
The flip side of that, of course, is that if you can't get in to see a family doctor in a system where everything is built around that original relationship, we got huge problems.
That's right. And so I think that we have a lot of work to do in that area. We know, for example, and I talk about this, that in Canada, fewer than 50% of Canadians will say that they can get in to see their family physician on the same day or next day when they call with an urgent problem, which is how we've seen, just as an example, certainly in urban centers, the rise of the walk-in clinic, a convenient form of care, which I understand why people use it, but actually quite the opposite of what we would consider to be relationship-based primary care. Very episodic, no relationship, no ongoing chart, no communication back, and not the kind of model that really, I think, supports high-quality healthcare. And so in the absence of those relationships, we see that kind of breakdown. So it's my view that we need to up our game in primary care. I say that as a family doctor, and I think that there's a lot of the work that we can do, and it's absolutely doable is part of the point that I'm trying to make. It's not magic. We don't need thousands more doctors. We don't need a ton more money in the system. We just need to organize a little bit better what we're doing.
Pharmacare, another of your ideas. Why is a national pharmacare plan, in your view, essential?
for this very simple reason that 1 in 5 Canadian households reports that someone in that household is not taking their medication as prescribed because of concerns about costs. So Canada is now officially the only country in the developed world with a universal healthcare system that doesn't include prescription drugs. And I think that that is shameful, frankly. I mean, in an age where we're trying to move healthcare out of the hospital to keep people well in the home, it's absurd that a person who's admitted to the hospital could have access to all of the care they need, including all of the medications, and the instant that that person sets foot outside the hospital on the sidewalk with a prescription in their hand, they're on their own.
Under this legislation, the maximum a independent party or third party can spend is $4,000 in a constituency. That barely covers 3,000 letters sent out in a riding, all right, in 1 month. And that's really not a very effective way of communicating an issue such as autism or Sierra Club or any other group. You know, to spend only $4,000 in a riding that has 85 or 100,000 people in it, that's really, you know, a gag order in a sense.
You know Premier Wynne.
I do.
You know her personally.
Yes, I do.
You've spent time with her. You've traveled with her.
Yes, I have.
Have you talked with her directly about this?
I have raised it.
And?
And she is, in her beliefs, moving forward on this path.
Why did she not see it your way? And
I guess my level of persuasiveness was not as well as it should have been.
you're just not as persuasive as everybody thought you were, right? No, but the limits are dramatically lower than they once were. And
Absolutely.
presumably during your conversations, you said to her, "Here are the consequences of your doing that."
No, I didn't. I said, you know, it's a democratic right that people should be able to engage and encourage people to engage in the electoral process, and putting these limits handcuffs people's ability to participate. And we want to encourage more people to participate in the electoral process, not limit it. And as far as Tim's point is concerned, I have no problems with limiting the amount of money spent. And, you know, right now you were correct that there was no effective limit. And if they want to put on a limit that matches what the political parties or is less than, and I propose this in editorials of saying 2/3 of what the electoral parties are entitled to, we could live with that. You know, that's a reasonable limitation. But, you know, to go to the extreme that they've gone to really isn't benefiting everyone.
The challenge is it's fundamentally, you know, you're making a call about the balance, right? So if each of the parties have to follow a limit that's set in the legislation, Liberal Party, the NDP, the Greens, the Conservatives can't make up a new entity, can't form a new entity and then go spend as that. They have only that amount and that official amount in each riding and nationally. What this does, it says for each entity that wants to have a voice, they're not denied the voice. They're not, certainly they can, you know, issue press releases, talk to the media, have demonstrations. There's absolutely zero limitation on their ability to say that which they want to say in any forum they want. All it does is says you can't spend a certain amount. And the reality is you could have tens, dozens, hundreds of organizations, each at that limit, and could drown out the noise of that, of the debate of the parties. So you've got to make a balance, right? I mean, is there a, you know, could I make a case for a little more, a little? I probably could. At the end, you make a call. You know, is it perfect? Maybe not, but I think we're going to give this a shot and see how it works. And I think the balance is a pretty good one. And I think that's the logic that drove the Premier's analysis. And we now have a regime that I think is, as I said, one of the leading jurisdictions globally in limiting spending and fundraising.
You know, the parties don't control democracy. They don't control elections.
Agree with that
The
completely.
people are the ones who are at the center of elections and democracy.
Of course.
And so what you're saying is you're putting the political parties ahead of the people.
No.
Tell me how you're not.
It's a balance between allowing private money to do that which it wants, or putting limitations on how much private money. And that all it does is there's some limitation on the private money.
You would
and
like
I think
private
most
organizations
Ontarians
to have
would
the same rights as political
I
parties.
think they should have.
And they don't, in your view.
Not
under
under-
but
not under
okay, but
this,
understand what that
situation.
means, right? Understand what that means. The U.S. has a proliferation of things called PACs, Political Action Committees, which is where private money goes in gobs, bucketfuls, barrelfuls to influence campaigns, and they are slivers away from individuals, and they spend millions, hundreds of millions in the U.S., and that is what a let every private entity do what it wants.
And we're trying to avoid
system.
that,
And we're
obviously.
trying to avoid that system. You got to make, there's a balance.
Carl.
And is it perfect? I don't know.
I think, regardless of the amount of money that's actually allowed to be spent on third-party advertising, the issue is really the definition of third-party advertising, which in this bill is very restrictive. In this bill, it stops third-party organizations from being able to advertise on any issue that has been discussed by a party, a candidate, a member in the legislature, which is essentially everything. So, I mean, I think there's some issues around that as well as the amount of money, which is what we've been talking
So
about thus
too
far.
restrictive in your view?
Yeah, I think so.
Sean, I want to take you back almost 35 years. When this kid was a cub reporter covering TTC meetings at Yonge and Davisville every other Tuesday morning. And I do remember Paul Godfrey, who was the chairman of Metropolitan Toronto of the day, now, of course, running the National Post. I remember him saying, we're not a social service here. We're a transportation company, and it doesn't matter how much you make, we're providing the same service to the same people. Why is he wrong?
Oh, he's wrong because public transit is a public good. It's an expression of how we not only see ourselves, see our city, see society. And as Richard was saying, there's an economic element, there's a social element. There is it's a core value. Mobility is very important. Everyone talks about generally mobility in terms of vehicles on the road, right? But no one really translates that mobility in terms of transit vehicles. No one complains. You asked about, you had that quote earlier, no one complains about an empty road. And yeah, if you run an empty bus, there's a riot, right? So I think there's completely a double standard. And so Mr. Godfrey, with all due respect, I was about 10 at the time, but he's wrong. He's wrong. And I think we subsidize travel. We've been doing it for centuries in different ways. And so why now, when we're overtly subsidizing transit, is it an issue? And to Richard's point, I think that we should stop bragging about how, quote, efficient the TTC is in terms of recovering 70% of its funding through the fare box. I think that's actually regressive. And I think that the subsidy, as Richard was saying, needs to be increased. And I do want to say Toronto is in the GTA context, in the Ontario context, is really late to the game in subsidizing transit.
For the reason we just described, it's never been seen as a social service.
Well, it's interesting when you look at, but it always has been. It always has been. York Region Transit, the Peel Region Transit agencies, for example, Mississauga, et cetera, have been subsidizing transit for low-income riders for several years. And I think a part of it is because they do not have that hell-bent RC ratio drive, i.e., they're not afraid to subsidize transit.
What's an RC ratio?
RC ratio is revenue cost, sorry.
Okay.
That sort of RC ratio obsession that we have in Toronto.
Okay. Are you clear in your mind, Martin, having looked at this probably for a few decades yourself, whether public transit in Ontario is more a public service versus a transportation service?
It's both, and it has to be both. And
But at some point, you got to decide if you're fish or fowl, don't you?
Well, yes. And while I agree with everything that people are saying here, count me in for the subsidies. And Sean is right that other jurisdictions have been ahead of us on subsidizing the working poor and others. And Toronto is late to the game on this. But Paul Godfrey may have been wrong all those years ago, but he has prevailed. His legacy is, we have inherited his legacy, and
His
so
view
we are
carried the day, that's for sure.
Yeah, and so we, quite wrongly, we have to, however, accept that reality, not accept it, but live with that reality or adjust to that reality and make our decisions and our planning based on that reality. I can tell you're already worried about that. But so what I'm saying is we do need to deal in the reallocation game, the priorities game, to your question. We can't have it all as much as I would like to. I would like to say, or repeat what I said earlier, that transit should be free, but it's not going to happen. So that means taking away money from seniors, as other jurisdictions have. It also means going back to efficiency, I think, bring in more money by all means, but it'll take a decade or more until we see the results from those kinds of investments that we need, if we even get those investments. The problem with the issue of efficiency, which can apply to technology and apps and frequency and so on, also applies to, obviously, the Scarborough subway debacle, which is perhaps the elephant in the room here. There's your billions of dollars being misapplied. I suspect everyone here will be opposed to the subway in Scarborough, which is coming at the expense of the Finch LRT, I suppose, and other LRTs. And to Marcy's point about gentrification, sorry, it's all bottled up here because I've got so many good thoughts. And that American template of distortions in planning and so on, which favor the white suburbs at the expense of the black inner cities. I don't think we've seen that here. But gentrification has been a kind of a creeping distortion, because when the subway tracks are laid down here, the growth comes. So there may be some false correlations between affluence and accessibility. People can buy in. So that's where you get to where we are today.
When you and I were kids, the world felt dangerous but predictable, right? There was a Cold War, and you knew that, yes, there were tens of thousands of missiles facing the Soviet Union and the United States, but there was a certain predictability about the way the world unfolded, and there were proxy wars here and there. Would you say the world today is more or less predictable than that?
It sounds silly to say it, but it is predictably unpredictable. If you want to look at what happened last year, of course, the rise of some of these right-wing demagogues, not only Donald Trump and some of his ideas, which aren't necessarily right-wing, they're all over the map, but Duterte in the Philippines, what has happened in Turkey and with the Turkish leadership. Those things, what happened, we could not predict that Turkey would be locking up so many people, so many journalists,
More
so many
authoritarian everywhere.
Everywhere. And that is the unpredictability that is predictable, but you can't pick the spots. For example, this year, who will be the new despot? We can't say, but
we know who the old ones are.
Yeah, and
not sure who the new ones are.
But there probably are going to be some new ones. A lot of countries are in a great state of flux.
Well, let's look at some of those countries, and I want to start with Europe. And of course, the danger of your annual visits here is that you're on the record, on tape, saying what you've said. So we get a year later to sort of play your words back to you and see how smart you were.
And you did last year as well.
And well, we're going to do it again. Well, why break a nice tradition, right? Sheldon, Europe, roll it.
Europe is in a total mess. It's not only about the refugees and how they digest all of these people and can they remain tolerant democratic societies. There's Italy is the next Greece. Everything's shaping up for another summer of potential big bailouts and all kinds of diplomatic wrangling. And will Britain leave the European Union? Will the European project even exist? There's that one. It's going to accelerate, I think, in the next year.
Okay, let's look a year later. Fair to say that those trends that you described have, in fact, accelerated.
They have. Italy hasn't been quite as volatile as I thought it would be, but those other things are definitely happening.
And the PM resigned.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There's Brexit has triggered a lot of things in Europe that Canadians are not tracking very closely. But it is freeing the right-wing movements in other countries to say some pretty outrageous things. And the European project that I talked about in terms of failing, it is closer to death this year than last year. And
closer to death or closer to the flu?
No, death.
The end of the European Union.
The end of the European Union. If a couple more of those countries bolt, what do you have? What really do you have?
When you say a couple of more countries bolt, who's bolted? So no one's bolted yet.
Britain has said it is committed through a plebiscite to leaving the Union.
They sure look like they're doing everything they possibly can not to have to do that.
The current government is trying to do that, but it's a matter of law that they're leaving. Right now they're trying to negotiate the terms. People were as shocked in Europe by that result, frankly, as the Trump result shocked people everywhere, including North America.
But do you think they're actually going to invoke Article 50 and then begin negotiating their departure?
They must. They must.
Well, they don't It's actually the courts are considering this all right now.
How and when they do it is something, but the public wants out. The right-wing movements are on the rise in France, in Hungary, and in several Eastern European countries. Poland right now is wavering in a number of things. Sweden is far more right-wing than it was. Denmark is far more. When I speak about Canada being isolated, we used to think we were like the Scandinavian nations, Steve. Well, we're not like the Scandinavian nations much anymore because they have moved considerably to the right on things like immigration, on some human rights issues. It's quite a move.
Okay, you just mentioned France in that. You also mentioned Angela Merkel earlier. So I do want to get a little focus on those two countries because they're both going to have elections in 2017. And tell us, in your view, how critical those elections are to the future of the European project.
Well, there are only three players, really, big players in the European Union. They're Britain, France, and Germany. If one of them is going, you say they may not go. I say they go, but the terms still have to be discussed. That's absolutely true. But if one or other, I don't see Germany going, but I see the potential for France to be fractured. And already Germany is carrying a tremendous burden financially for the European Union, and also a lot of Europeans are unhappy with Merkel for her policies on immigration, and that is a time bomb for her also domestically. I see her muddling through.
Fast fashion, what is that?
Fast fashion essentially describes a production model, whereas most people sort of associate it with cheap clothing readily available to them in retailers like H&M or Forever 21. What it actually describes on the back end is a production practice where we go from design of the garment to retail of the garment in 6 weeks, rather than the traditional timeline, which would be about 6 months. So you can see how that's a pretty dramatic contraction in time, hence the word fast fashion.
And thus no more spring, summer, fall, or winter lines. Everything's just sort of compressed.
Seasons are pretty much over, yeah.
Now, why did this happen?
Well, that's that's a multifaceted question, of course, but it happened for quite a few reasons. Fashion theorists say that there's so many mixed messages going on in terms of what's on trend right now that we want to buy more and more, and we need a bunch of different looks for a season rather than one. So that's one explanation. Another explanation would be making money. If you can sell more product more quickly and sell through your entire unit number, like sell every product of that style, then you're going to make a better profit. So these are a few reasons. And then also consumer demand. We want to go shopping and we want the store to look new every time. So that's exciting.
We appear to have an insatiable demand for new product always.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is this healthy?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, is it healthy for us? I don't know. It's nice to have a new dress all the time, I'll say that.
So the fact is that if you were to go into the typical middle-class person's closet today, what you would see compared to, say, 25 or 50 years ago would be what?
A lot more clothing.
A lot more.
Which, to bring it back to this health issue, is not so great for the planet. And so one of the stories that I sort of like to tell about how we know we have more clothes is just look at your closet. I mean, if you go into a Victorian home, the closet's pretty tiny, and probably the first thing you're going to do is turn that little kid bedroom into a walk-in closet. Whereas when you look at a brand new shiny condo, you probably already have the walk-in closet and then less living space. And so you can actually see how we've been displaced almost from our own living space by our clothing.
But everything, I thought, is supposed to go up in price as the years go on. And I know, for example, when I was a kid, well, maybe not a kid, but let's say 25, 30 years ago, if I want to buy a T-shirt, probably 20 bucks, maybe even 25 bucks for a nice T-shirt. You can get a T-shirt today for what, 7, 8 bucks, 9 bucks?
If that.
If that even.
$4.99 tables, that kind of thing, yeah.
Am I getting good quality for $4.99?
Oh, are you expecting good quality for $4.99?
Okay, good question.
Yeah.
What am I getting for $4.99?
Well, you are probably getting a product that someone hasn't been paid, basically, on that deal. And I can tell you it's probably not the brand. And it's probably not the people working in North America. The designers and the retail workers, they get paid. retail minimum wage, and there's issues around internships and that kind of thing. But the workers making that T-shirt are the ones that lose out.
The workers in Bangladesh and India and mostly where these things are made, right?
Exactly, yeah. The sort of labor laws are very lax, and labor is much cheaper in those nations, and that also explains why the price has come down on T-shirts. As developing nations have sort of entered the clothing market, they've been able to offer an even more competitive rate on their labor, and they do so by exploiting workers that didn't have a job before.
Okay, if you take that out of the equation, the notion that the supply line gets more efficient, everybody's got a better business model, therefore we're going to pay less now than we did 25 years ago for something. I mean, in theory, that's kind of how capitalism works, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
That's to be admired at some level, is it not?
Well, we're getting into a different argument now,
Okay,
aren't we,
bigger
Steve?
question, yes. So tell me.
But I would say that there is absolutely an economic imperative for brands to offer that low price to their customers. I see that. I'm price conscious. I'm a grad student. But there's also sort of this other kind of uglier side of it where if you're looking at a $4.99 T-shirt, you only have to think back a few steps in the supply chain. So think about the retail employee that checked you out, through the register, and then think about the manager of that store, and then think about the distribution manager for all the locations in that area. Go back, think about the brand, the designer, and you can actually start to go all the way back to the person that sewed the garment, probably many hands sewed each different piece, and then further back than that, the person who spun the fabric. Further back than that, the person who drove the fiber from the farm. Further back than that, the person who planted the seed. So you can imagine how a $4.99 T-shirt, not everybody's gonna get a cut of that.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review. You can see all of those conversations in their entirety at tvo.org and on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit tvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.